Welcome to Forest Chat, where we talk about individual endeavour in Western Australia, what it takes, what it means, and how you do it. I'm your host, Paul Vandermeer, and in today's episode we're talking with Michelle Gauntlett about silversmithing. Michelle started her silversmithing journey when she was around 20 years old and carries on today. Welcome to Forest Chat, Michelle.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
It's great to have you here, Michelle. Silversmithing might have quite a range of different connotations for people. What actually is silversmithing as you practice it?
Silversmithing is basically working with metal, and I think there's lots of different techniques you can do. A lot of people associate being a silversmith with being a jeweller, which is a part of it. But in my head, silversmithing is more working with the metal and pushing it in different ways than you would with jewellery. So say forming spoons or cutlery, bowls, vessels, more of a, almost in a contemporary form that would be translated into sculptural forms even. And it doesn't always have to be silver because, of course, you can't always use silver and you don't want to practice in silver. So generally, I always start with copper for all my ideas, but I quite love the colour of copper. So sometimes I just stick with copper and sometimes I want to do a silver form or I have a commission, then I will use silver, yeah.
So there's a few different metals that you can use by the sound of things.
Mm-hmm.
Silver is, I think, reasonably well known from its use in jewellery.
Mm-hmm.
And copper is something that's really big in the electrical sphere.
Mm-hmm. And in industry, yeah. But copper is the same, has the same malleability and heating point as silver, sterling silver. So when you're learning, copper is a really economic metal to work with to practice your ideas, and when you're practicing in copper it behaves similarly to sterling silver. So you know, if you make a mistake or if something in your design isn't working, then you can work out how to make it work in copper without ruining it in silver, you know. So it's a really useful metal, and it's often more accessible, especially now. I get a lot of my copper from the scrapyards.
Because there's a lot of people collecting copper from all sorts of various places.
Not all scrapyards are open to having people, customers, come in and, you know, scrounge through their stuff. But I have a couple of scrap metal people who save things for me, and I've made use of their cable. They have lots of wire cabling in different diameters and thicknesses, so you know, it's a really easy, accessible way rather than, and it saves postage and it's more fun to go and just pick out bits that inspire you and that you think you might use, and then come back and play with those or experiment with those, you know, work on them in different ways. And I get sheet copper from the scrapyard, which the scrapyard I get it from, they take apart transformers that were used in the mining industry. I really like that idea of, you know, using that metal for a more culturally appropriate.
Putting it to a shape use rather than a...
Yes, let's build something aesthetically pleasing with the resource that you have dug from the ground. I don't know. It's just a thing I have, and also because I like the forms that you can get it in. You can't, when you buy from a metal merchant, you don't always get it in some of those forms that you can find in the scrapyard.
Oh, so they've already been
used in a way for a purpose. So the profiles of them are very different to, normally you can only buy round copper wire, maybe square, I'm not sure. You can buy square silver wire. But, my husband came home with a piece the other day which was so beautiful, like the thickness and the width and the weight, and it's not a profile you would ever find at a metal merchant selling silver. But you could form it into that yourself. But this just came like that, so it was a bit magical moment, You get more magical moments from the scrapyard than you do from, I won't mention the merchants, but,
But from a merchant anywhere, basically.
From a merchant anywhere, yeah. Although, if you're working on hollow forms or dishes or bowls, you generally have to start with a disc shape. So in Australia, you cannot buy disc-shaped pieces of metal. You have to buy a square or rectangular piece of metal. And the largest piece of silver that you can buy is probably the size of an A4 piece of paper.
So quite small, really.
Mm-hmm. And if you want to cut circles out of that, you've always got those corners bits left over that you think, oh, what am I going to do with those bits? Because you don't want to throw them away. So, you save all those bits. But if you were to go to the UK, you can order and purchase discs in any diameter, up to, I don't know, nearly a metre.
Right, so that's a big difference in what you can get here compared to what you can get overseas.
That's the industry. That's the age-old industry, from the motherland, if you like, really. We don't have the capacity, we don't have the heritage, we don't have the industry that's built up around that. So the silversmiths, that's where all of those things were made, in Sheffield and Birmingham and London, and that's where it began, and that's where it's still going very strong. And here we have just begun, really.
By comparison, a fleggling industry.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Mentioned something interesting earlier that I connect to effectively the offcuts, I'll call them. You mentioned earlier about potentially destroying a piece. I sort of imagine that in silversmithing you would be like creating your own base metals or melting it down or something like that. Is that a part of what you do as well?
Yeah, we do. So if you are making a bowl or a cup or a beaker or something, then you generally are buying sheet silver, sometimes copper. In Australia, we have a thing called bimetal, which is copper on one side, silver on the other, and it's molecularly bonded. They also do that same thing with gold and silver, so it will be microfine molecules of gold in the sterling silver. So that's kind of like a more economical way to get the same colour effect without paying exorbitant prices. But yeah, generally you don't smelt metal unless you want to use up all your scraps. So, those little off-cut bits that I have left over of the corners of things, I might, say, melt those down and pour them into a mould of sorts. You can use sand for a mould to cast shapes, or sometimes I use cuttlefish.
Cuttlefish?
Yeah, cuttlefish is a really beautiful thing to use, and once again, where I live is right near the beach, so I can collect it. You have to kind of let it dry out really well, otherwise it might explode when it gets hot. But yeah, it's quite quick, very little equipment. Basically, you need a crucible to heat the metal, and then you can either form the cuttlefish into a mould that you pour the metal into like you would a sand mould, or you can just make little channels in the cuttlefish and sort of create your own wire, and the wire would come out with the beautiful textures of the cuttlefish on it, which is really nice. So quite often I melt down people's gold in that way, and then they want a ring reformed and they want all those kind of watery patterns on it, then that's the way that I would do that.
All right, interesting. I had no concept that...
Cuttlefish was no, I know. It smells really bad when it gets hot though. You know, when you pour the metal in, it goes black, so it's scorched, and it's you can't use that hole twice, if you know what I mean. You have to get another piece of cuttlefish for each piece that you pour. But
it's consumed.
Yeah, but in a good way. Yeah, in a good way. And it's, well, for me, it's something that I find and I make use of, and I like to do that in my work. I feel a kind of obligation at this point to think more sustainably, and that's hard when people want you to make a gold something or other. You know, you try not to overthink that part of it. But yeah, in as many ways as I can, I like to consider that side when I'm working.
And as a silversmith, what's the community of silversmithing like?
Well, we have the Jewellery and Metalsmiths group of Western Australia. There's another one in Victoria and Queensland. We have a conference every 2 years, maybe, might be a bit longer, where we all get together in one of those places. Last year it was in Perth, which was amazing, and so everybody comes, and then we have special speakers that come from international speakers and a lot of local people as well, and we have activities, and you know, it's a really good way to get together. We have, in our own state, we have meetings every so often. Sometimes we have a lot of regional members, and I'm kind of on the outskirts of suburbia, so quite often we Zoom in for the meetings. We have exhibitions that are organised that we can work towards. It's always nice to have that in the background. Then you feel like there's a reason why you're doing what you're doing, because you're making it something for that. It's quite satisfying. There aren't many opportunities for that to happen. You have to really kind of search them out and make them happen. So connecting in with those people in that group is really important. Also, it's hard to maintain connections sometimes physically, so having Instagram, which I began probably 4 years ago, has been invaluable for my connection to the whole international jewellery community and learning about other places that I could possibly exhibit or become a part of.
So that's like broadening your horizons in the...
Yeah, well, you have to, because our horizon here is quite limited, and, you know, even we are quite separate from the eastern states, as everybody knows. In 2019, I got a silversmithing residency scholarship to go to the UK, to a place called Bishopsland, which sounded to me like some kind of magical fairy tale world. And when I saw the video of where it was, I just thought, oh, it would be like a dream come true. And it came true. I was accepted to attend, and then I had to come up with the money to pay for the tutoring and the accommodation, and, you know, and plus leave my home for 6 months and my job and everything, and still pay the bills. And so I wrote for a creative development grant, and I got it. Nice. Which paid for my tuition, workshop fees, and my accommodation in the UK. So basically I just had to pay for airfares and food. It was amazing. Every single day I woke up, I was just felt so grateful, and every day was amazing to be in that environment. I was totally immersed we were in a regional area, so we had no interference from the world at large. We had a great workshop with tutors that came and upskilled our technical skills. So we had master classes every 3 or 4 weeks with a range of different people that worked in specific techniques like enamelling, raising metal, chasing and repoussé, hand engraving, and all of those things, and all of those people that taught us as master classes had been through the program that I was in. And their philosophy is that once they'd learned and got to a certain level, then they would teach other people. That's it. That's how you sustain the craft. So, you know, watching them work and learning from them and feeling so supported and lucky, and to have landed in that family of fellows, which I now will have for the rest of my life. You know, they are, once you've been through that, I know that I can ask them any question or anything and they will help me.
It's so critical that you've got those connections with those people as well.
Well, they also, you know, I learned when I was over there about that industry. Like I was saying before, like it blew me away because they train you they have this place called the Goldsmith Centre, and they train you there. They do workshops. They support kids coming out of school. They have scholarships for young business entrepreneurs. They have classes in this and classes in that, and it's not unusual, you know. So my advice would be to a young person from here, if you want to learn that stuff, go there, learn that stuff, and then come back, because there is an amazing amount of information you can mine and people and craft skills, but it is quite a rigid industry or not rigid, you know, it's so established. There is more freedom here in, you know, what we can make and the way we make. I think maybe it's our upbringing, maybe it's because, we live in a very different environment, and we also seem to have a more let's make do with whatever we can.
Yes, make it happen.
Make it happen, but also, and make the most of what we have. And we do that in a very different way, whereas they are so established that they are used to having this there on their doorstep. So for me, as a silversmith, I have to do everything on my own, whereas they will do the labour, but then they will give it to John the polisher to polish it, and then James the plater to plate it, and then, you know, they have all these specialisations, and they're right on their doorstep. You know, we don't have anything on our doorstep. There is the commercial industry, jewellers industry, but they don't raise metal. They don't do what I do. There are possibly even a few spinners who might spin bowls. I know there was one in Osborne Park somewhere who did copper. It's like on a lathe. But other than that, we don't have access to the industry and the range of industry that you have over there. And that was mind-blowing for me, just to see that and to understand where we are in that sort of stream of production. We are very, very culturally apart, and that can be a really good thing, I think.
Gives you a much more well-rounded...
Well, I think Western Australia, we're building our culture because we're so young. in terms of countries, and we don't really know. It hasn't really developed, and sadly, it's really hard for it to develop when there are no cultural bodies that support crafts and handcrafts. You know, in the 80s there was the Craft Council. That's gone. I think there is a fibre thing, but there is no real government, political. There's no recognition that this could be beneficial as a career pathway or as an alternative, as a, you know, it goes all the way down to school level. It's what is, what's the word? What is recognised as being beneficial, and the powers that be do not recognise the arts as being an important part of education, when in fact I think if you want a balanced education, if you want happy kids or happy people in your, you know, in your state, then you've got to give them more of life understanding. You know, it's not, people think, oh, it's artsy fartsy and why do you do that and what use is it? Well, the creative problem-solving skills that come from those activities are invaluable, and the mental health well-being for that individual throughout their entire life, if they've got something that holds them steady and happily, you know, engaged, that's invaluable. You know, that would translate for years to come, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
There's
the big push towards STEM, so science, technology, engineering and mathematics. But that's all very externally driven and doesn't really hit what a person actually needs.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I've been a teacher for 20 years in the education department, and I have watched. It was STEM, then it was STEAM, then it was STEM, 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 STEM. The A has gone out of STEM. It used to be there. It's now not. And I don't know why. I was in the arts department, and the arts department became arts and technology. So even manual arts became design and technology. You know, what's happened to the manual? And even in writing, kids don't hand write for very long before they are put in front of a screen or a keyboard. And that's a different thinking pathway in your brain, I think. There's something about holding a pen and drawing it across the page in different ways that activates something in the human brain. I think they need to be very careful about disregarding that completely.
And your experience with how you do your blacksmithing and using your hands for that?
I'm ambidextrous. I've always, like, when I was growing up, if I picked up the pen in my right hand, I would write with my right hand. If I picked it up in my left hand, I would write backwards at school in grade 1. And I don't know why, but I'm very dexterous. So I like using tools. And that's why I really love doing hand engraving. Like, you do chisel engraving. You've got a hammer in one hand and the chisel in the other, and your body up against a piece of silver, and you're tapping channels through it. It's like, there's nothing better. That's what it feels like. It would probably be like wood carving with a chisel, only you're doing it into a piece of silver, and you're not sitting down in front of a computer programming in what font you want and then pushing the button and poking the metal underneath it. That to me is soulless. You know, that doesn't really interest me anymore. And I taught for so long in front of 2 computer screens. And, don't get me wrong, I love technology and I love what it can do as a tool. I don't think it should be everything. And I don't think it should be everywhere either.
Our whole industrial base has moved towards computerisation and even robots and that sort of thing, which is even further out.
Mm-hmm.
But it used to be handcrafted.
Yep, not now. In the UK, they have, and Norway specifically, they have amazing places and courses and things that's the entire focus is on maintaining and teaching those skills so that they live on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because if we don't do something about teaching those skills, they will disappear.
Yeah, and the machines will make them. And because we don't have those places here, that's a little bit scary. We don't have those places that recognise the benefits and the importance of those hand skills. There are a few. The one that springs to mind is that beautiful wooden boat building factory in Franklin in Tasmania. There are places down south in Dwelling Up, and the wood places. And there are individual studios and people in all of these little towns that work in that way. But there are few places, not as many places as they would have in other countries, in other older countries.
Yeah, it's a very sad thing to see disappear.
Very sad.
All the thinking that goes behind it, when I say thinking, what I really mean there, I guess, is that the mind aspect of actually being able to use your hands and the benefits people get from using their hands to do things, as opposed to just tapping a few things and
pushing buttons and making beeping sounds. I make lots of loud sounds. Hammering. I love hammering. And I've always hammered. That's a funny thing. My father was a carpenter and a master cabinet maker. So I think my mother used to send me down to his workshop to get me out of her kitchen. and I used to always say, can I hammer, can I hammer, can I hammer? So I always had a piece of wood and a bunch of nails that were mine, but I had to hammer the nails in and then pull them out if I wanted to reuse them, which I didn't mind doing, So I got quite dexterous with tools, and I was always asking, what's that tool? Oh, that's a chisel. What do you do with that? Can I use that? What's that? That's, so I've always been around tools and making and watching him make and the process, what was he going to do next, and had to measure, and he was always testing us on measurements and when it changed from inches to centimetres, and we used to sit at the dinner table and he would say, well, how many centimetres are in an inch, but I think he was saying that for himself because all the plans had changed, so he had to get that through his head as well.
Yeah, he had years of the imperial system and had to swap over.
And then he had to swap over. So because he'd been swapping it over, he decided that we should be swapping it over too. So it was a dinner table conversation was, mathematical metric conversions from imperial to metric.
Sounds like fascinating dinner table conversation.
I know. But I do bless him now, really, for the workshop and the math and the dexterity and craft, because he built boats, he built everything. He could build anything. I remember he did a car there was a wooden car that somebody had bought, and my uncle said, that he knew this man that had bought this car, but it was broken, and he took my dad out there to see if they could fix a part of this car, which was curved wood, and he did. So that's what he liked, to fix things as well and keep things and make things that last for a long time and make them with love and energy and thought and care, It's kind of imbued in the object in a way. I think I was taught that you put effort and care, you're putting a bit of yourself in that handmade thing.
Yeah, that's very important, and that's really good for you as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an expression. You don't always get to express in many ways. I mean, you can talk, you can sing, you can dance, but it's nothing like hammering.
And what you can put together with a hammer and...
Yeah, hammering, soldering, filing, sawing. I think I like doing those things and knowing what they lead to and doing the next step, and it's a little satisfaction after each point. Sometimes it's does your head in, and you think, oh. But I've learned that when something's not working, I don't persist in that particular thing or to become irritated and annoyed by it. I'll walk away and work on something else. And quite often I get an epiphany while I'm working on something else, and I come back and go, oh, that's why it didn't work. That's why you didn't do it. Or, yeah, I've learned that. I've learned incredible patience in not only with the thing but with myself, which I think is a really healthy thing to have.
Yeah, it's good to know that when it's not quite going right, that you can step away, understanding that going off and doing something else could lead you back and to sorting it out.
And not to panic. Yeah. I think that's what silversmithing taught me. It was like the man that taught me, Philip Noakes, taught me, and he said, you can't really ruin it. It's never really unredeemable, which some people would argue that depends on what you're working on, because you can actually torch something until it melts too far and there's no coming back from that. But I think you have to have that belief as you're doing it and the intent. That's what one of my teachers taught me when I was doing chasing a repousse, which is where you hold little stamps, if you like, and a hammer, and you form different shapes into the metal. But she used to say you have to have the right intent when you're holding the chasing tool and hitting it with the hammer. Your intention has to be that line or that thing or that, which I thought was really interesting. And it always pops into my head every time I pick up that hammer now, that specific chasing hammer, and the tool, I'm always like, right, I'm intending that line to go around here, and it invariably does.
That's the body-mind connection.
Yeah.
Your mind's going, this is where you need to go, and your body's going.
And you trust that. You learn to trust that. I think that's a big part of it.
And how does silversmithing impact the community?
I've got no idea about that answer. I don't think the community even know about silversmithing, sadly. How does it? It would depend on if you were interested in those sorts of things. I have people that visit my studio because I do little workshops in there for very, very small groups, like 3 to 4 people. A few of my friends bring their visitors from other countries that are coming for a holiday, and they don't know where to take them, and so they say, we'd like to bring them to your place to have an experience. So they come for the day and they make a bangle and a little dish, and they play with the tools and they laugh and have lunch, and then they go off. And some of them say, oh, I never imagined I could ever do that. Or that was so good. I haven't done anything like that before in my life. They surprise themselves. And some of them say, oh, I don't want to go home. I want to do this. And I say, this particular girl that said that was from the UK, and I said, there are so many people where you live where you could do this. I know she's gone back and now been studying that. So it's interesting that people get a little taste and they want more. And there is 2 or 3 places in Perth where you can learn at the Freo Arts Centre, and there are a few individual makers who run lessons from their studios, and there's Contemporary Metal Studio, but that will be closing, I think, next year, sadly.
Is that a closure due to where they're going, or...?
I think they're retiring.
So that's what happens with some of these, that people may have been in it for a lifetime, but at some point they put the tools down, and after that the experience.
I know
and
there's
knowledge.
a lot of people who would like to continue that legacy, if you like, but there are very few buildings available that would be appropriate to start one in, and very little funding toward that. It would be good if maybe the government, like in South Australia, they have a place called the Jam Factory. The Jam Factory is a gallery, but it's also studio spaces for ceramicists, glass makers, silversmiths, I don't know what else, but they have an exhibition space. They have a shop front, a beautiful design shop front with all of these magnificent items that are made there. So they've cultivated that, and that was funded by the government that built that. I don't know how it's funded now, but each state needs one of them. If they really want to develop the cultural currency of Australia, each state needs a place like the Jam Factory. And there is one in Canberra. I'm not sure if they have studios, but there is a craft design centre. There is Craft Victoria. Once again, I don't know whether they have design studios. But, yeah, for me to be an artist in a craft sense, to get any insurance, I needed to go through an organisation of which there are none in WA. So I am a member of Craft Victoria and Craft Canberra.
Okay, so yeah, that's an interesting point. You have to go outside of the state to be a member over there. I know my wife is a naturopath and she has to be a member of an Australia-wide organisation, so that's a similar sort of thing to get the insurance.
Yep, interesting. A little bit frustrating. I don't know how you would change that. I think part of it is political in what their focus is on.
It's really a case of the focus is not on this and they effectively ignore it.
Do you know, they have spent so much money over the years, the government, on papers for the creative arts and the benefits of creative arts in education. And I've got them all at home because I'm a visual arts teacher. I've got them. And they are all saying the same things, and they are all extremely valid things, and they write these things as if they are going to fund them and as if they are the most important thing in the world, which I believe they are. And they are really just tick box token exercises that don't go anywhere, which is really, really disheartening.
Definitely when there's no action related to something that they can see is important.
There are very few senior high schools that see the beneficial things that can happen from arts practice. There are a few special arts schools in Western Australia. I've worked at one of them, which was absolutely amazing. And they have their own gallery. They have tutors that come in that are artists. They have run a program, but for a very small group of students, like for a class full of students every year, a new class full comes in and they go through to year 12, which is great. But imagine if there were more schools that did that. Private schools often have a much better system and much better arts, often have their own galleries, and even some of them have their own shop fronts in their galleries. Oh, wow. Yes, oh wow. And those schools are private schools. It's creating a divide. It's not really a very fair one.
There's a barrier to entry for a lot of people to get to that level of support for art, for their art.
Yeah, and if public schools aren't making art as a priority, or even acknowledging it as a possibility or a potential career path, then it's just sort of filtering out. I think the career paths that they focus on, like you say, are the science, technology, engineering and maths, okay? And where do you think all those people go to work after they do all that?
The mines.
Yep. It's a really sad indictment on Western Australians' cultural wasteland.
Well, there is talk about Australia slipping down the list that measures how complex a nation's exports are. Mm-hmm. And Australia used to be at like number 90 on the list, and now we're down into the 112s or 15s or something. So we're slipping down the complexity of exports list, even behind African countries. There's only 140 on the list, and we're like heading for the bottom. And that's what you get when you export dirt. Might be dirt rich in things, but it's
very, very complex situation, isn't it?
So is there anything more that people would want to know? You did mention about a school in Fremantle and
Fremantle Arts Centre, Contemporary Metal Studio in Osborne Park. Now Heathcote have a few silversmiths out there that do classes occasionally. You would have to go onto Instagram and look, really. Or you could contact the Jewellery and Metalsmiths group. They have a website. I would inquire through the website because they would be the best people placed to tell you who could help you out with that specific request. Say if you wanted to make bangles, or if you wanted to make earrings, or if you wanted to do enamelling, or there'd be somebody to help you with that. TAFE still do some short courses, and TAFE is really, really well set up studio space in Aberdeen Street in Northbridge. But I am not sure how many short courses they do now. I used to go on Thursday nights and Saturday mornings, but you can also do cert courses at TAFE, and they give you a really good grounding. But some years there's been so few people that they nearly weren't going to run the jewellery course.
So there's demand and supply as well.
Yeah, and so they don't get people coming up to do that if people don't know that that's something that they can do.
and miss out on a whole market because the kids don't see it in their schooling, and relatively few, I guess, see it as an opportunity after that.
It's usually only the kids that have this thing in them, like I did. I want to make jewellery. You know, sometimes it doesn't go away. When I finished school, which was a long time ago, I looked up in the phone book for all the manufacturing jewellers and made a list, and then went into the city and knocked on every single door of those manufacturing jewellers saying, I want to be an apprentice, or I want to learn, or I want to... We don't take girls.
Oh, really?
But they're not allowed to say that now, are they? Yeah, but then that's what I was told. So I was a bit cross, as you can imagine. Then I went to night school and learned to solder. Then I went to TAFE, Korean TAFE, had a beautiful teacher there. Then I didn't do anything for a while. I set up my own at home, made bangles, set fire to my hair. Everyone sets fire to their hair at some point, or their paper towel, something. Then I really didn't go back to formal arts training till I was about 25. Then I did my degree and did printmaking, textiles, and there was a jewellery unit I found out over in the manual arts section at Edith Cowan, and I went and I begged them to let me do the jewellery unit for the manual arts teachers. And I think they got sick of me badgering them, so they finally said yes. So I did that, which just satisfied that little thing in me for a minute. Then I worked at Flora Metallica, which is a notorious jewellery place now, but for bad reasons. They used to plate things in gold and silver and sell to the souvenirs, really, I guess you would call them. But I learnt different skills in there. I also learnt that I wouldn't want to use that level of chemicals in my studio. I know that now.
That's a production facility thing, I guess.
Yeah. And I worked for Swarovski crystal wholesalers in Claremont. They were the only Swarovski crystal people in Australia. So we used to supply all of Australia with different things. So I learned to make components and to do production work. Like, you know, you make 100 pairs of ear wires in an afternoon and you do, yeah. So I got really good at that part of it, but I was always longing for the real thing, you know. And I think when I finally went to TAFE, it was only because I'd spoken to a jeweller on the street in Leederville where I was teaching and said, I really wanted to be a jeweller. He goes, you can still do it. You could go to TAFE. And he planted that little seed in me, so I went at school holidays. I walked into TAFE and went down to the jewellery section and said, can I enrol in the Thursday night class, I think it was. And he went, yeah, sure. So I just went there for 3 or 4 years, once a week, to get my skills up and my confidence back. And then I went from there to contemporary metal, because I wanted to learn to raise hollow forms, and I thought that I knew how to basically do what I wanted to do in the other areas at that point. And that's where I learned about Bishop's Land, was from going to contemporary metal. And then I went to Bishop's Land, which was a magical, and learned all these other skills, and ended up in Shetland with the master silversmith up there, learning from him, chasing un repoussé. And then whilst I was in Shetland, COVID hit. Yeah. And they told me I had to go home because they were closing the border. And I'm going, yeah, but I've got 3 or 4 more weeks left. It's on my, I've got my ticket. And everyone's going, no, you have to come home now. If you don't come home, you won't be able to get in. And I'm like, that doesn't sound very good. So I had to come home early.
Oh, what a shame.
I was on the last plane from Shetland to Aberdeen. Then they closed that airport. Then I was on the last plane from Heathrow to Perth, and then for quite a while.
Wow.
And then when I got home, I had to go into isolation. But thankfully, it was before they made you go into hotels.
Oh, right, yes.
I got to isolate in my studio, in my backyard, with my dog, and people bringing me food, and I could watch the garden and, hang out there. I was so grateful for that. God, I don't think I would have survived, in a hotel room without being able to open the windows.
Oh, no, that would be terrible.
I know. And my friends that went back, one of my friends went back to Poland. He had the military knocking on his door every day to make sure he was home. Yeah. Same in Taiwan, Korea. All the people that I'd been working with that had gone home also had to go home, and they went home to very different situations than what I was so-called trapped in. I felt very, very lucky, and it was really nice to debrief and unpack my bags, and I was in my studios, which no one had been in for 6 months, so I could, clear and clean and declutter. And
well, you had new ideas.
I did, and I had to make space for them, so it was just the perfect opportunity for the space in my head, space in my actual physicality. I rearranged things and chucked things away, and then every day I made something, because I'd been in that habit of every day going to the workshop and making something. So I was trying to stay in that habit of doing that, I also cultivated a really good meditation and yoga practice during that time.
Well, thank you very much, Michelle, for talking about being a silversmith. It's been fascinating.
Thank you.
And all Forest.chat listeners wish you all the best with your future endeavours.
Yeah, and I wish them all the best in doing silversmithing.
You've been listening to Forest.chat, where we talk about individual endeavour in Western Australia, what it takes, what it means, and how you do it. I'm your host, Paul Vandermeer, and today we've been talking with Michelle Gauntlett about being a silversmith. Remember, there are 4 ways to get involved with Forest.chat. Share the domain Forest.chat with your friends and family and people you meet. When you sign up for emails, you get advance notice of episodes. Listen to the episodes at forest.chat/episodes. If you do something interesting or that other people may find interesting, book an interview at forest.chat/interview. If you want to support a small business, book an advert at forest.chat/advert. I'm looking forward to joining you with our next guest. Until then, enjoy making it happen.